Too well she loved to speak a faithful word and lay her burden on his happy head. She pressed the outsurging grief back into her breast to dwell within, silent, unhelped, alone. Too well she loved that she would not like her burden to be put on his head. Was that only the burden of Savitri? Was that also not the burden of Satyavan? And lay her burden on his happy head. Satyavan has absolutely no idea about his death, which is approaching pretty fast. And all the grief, all the sorrow is in the heart of Savitri. She has taken the entire burden upon herself. It is the love's burden which she has housed in her own soul. That is the burden of her soul. And it is she alone who can disburden herself. There was no point at all of passing on that burden to Satyavan. In fact, that cannot be passed on to him. Because Savitri is carrying on that burden in her soul, she has to prepare herself yogically to see that it is removed. Too well she loved to speak a faithful word and lay her burden on his happy head. But Satyavan sometimes half understood from her movements, from her gestures, from the kind of anguish that would come up on her face, even perhaps by some kind of a casual comment or remark or word uttered by Savitri, he might understand a bit of her sorrow and suffering, get an idea of the burden she was holding in her breast. But Satyavan sometimes half understood or felt at least with the uncertain answer of our thought-blinded hearts, the unuttered need, the unplumbed abyss of our deep, passionate want. He saw mostly Savitri's passion for him, and in a thought-blinded heart, he could feel that there was something going on within her, and he wanted to respond to her. And therefore, wherever he went, whatever he was doing, he was carrying the figure of Savitri in his mind, in his heart. All of his speeding days, Dakut spare from labor in the forest, hewing wood, and hunting food in the sylvan glades, and service to his father's sightless life, he gave to her and helped to increase the hours by the nearness of his presence and his class, and lavish softness of heart seeking words, and a close beating felt of heart on heart. Well, that is how the young couple will respond to each other. He gave to her and helped to increase the hours by the nearness of his presence. Whenever he was not attending to his other duties, whenever he was close to her, by the nearness of his presence and his class, and lavish softness of heart-seeking words, and a close beating felt of heart on heart. He would speak sweet things, lovely things, things of love, of joy, of togetherness, and try to comfort, so to say, Savitri, that he was not in a position to give full of her love to her, as he had to attend his daily routines. He had to go to the forest, cut wood, collect food, collect flowers for the yajna, for the daily worship. He was attending all those things, but whenever I was free and not attending to the duties towards his blind father, he would give as much time as possible to Savitri, and lavish softness of heart-seeking words, and a close beating felt of heart on heart. All was too little for her bottomless need. Savitri's need was insatiable. It could not be easily satisfied. Her grief came from the deeps of grief, and it could not be easily assuaged. All was too little for her bottomless need. If in his presence she forgot a while, grief filled his absence with its aching touch. She saw the desert of her coming days. Imaged in every solitary hour, she saw the desert of her coming days, the wasteland of life, its sandy stretches without flower and bird and tree. That would be her life when he would be no more. She saw that desert. Desert is a place where the things, objects cannot cast their shadow. The shadows, even the hot sun, at the noon time also, bright sun, the objects cannot cast their shadow because the shadows melt away in the desert land. They do not exist there. It is in that condition Savitri saw that even the shadow of her joy with Satyavan would not exist. It will be a total wasteland of life stretching in front of her. If in his presence she forgot a while, grief filled his absence with its aching touch. She saw the desert of her coming days. Imaged in every solitary hour, whenever he will be away from her, in a solitary hour, what was she seeing? waste of life, stretches of sand, refractory existence without fruit and flower and leaf and tree. That will be the future for her. And she was worried also about that. Is she going to accept it? Is she going to somehow disown it? Is there any way for her to get out of it? She has been contemplating all the alternatives, all the possibilities. And one possibility which crosses her mind, her thoughts, her feelings, even perhaps her will, is the possibility of going away with Satyavan when he dies. The possibility of going along with him as Sati, so that there is no more that desert stretching in front of her. She would accompany him in life as much as in death by throwing herself on the burning pyre when he would die. If in his presence she forgot a while, grief filled his absence with its aching touch. She saw the desert of her coming days, imaged in every solitary hour, although with a vague imaginary bliss, a fiery union through death's door of escape. She dreamed of her body robed in funeral flame. She knew she must not clutch that happiness. She was ready to go with Sati along with Satyavan. She was ready for that. Of union through death's door of escape. She dreamed of her body robed in funeral flame. She would put on the attire of the Sati and enter into his pyre and vanish or disappear or accompany him even in death. But although with a vain imaginary bliss, but accompanying him through this process of Sati would be a vain imaginary bliss. It is vain because it is imaginary bliss. Savitri is imagining that she could accompany Satyavan in this manner and be always together with him. What is the certainty that it might happen? Is there a kind of an inevitability of them remaining together if she follows that course of action? Perhaps that is her imagination. But if it is her imagination, then obviously it is vain. There is no point then in taking that course of action, of entering the funeral pyre when she is living. There is no certainty. It could be a vain imaginary bliss. Although the vain imaginary bliss of fiery union through death's door of escape, she dreamed of her body robed in funeral flame. She knew she must not clutch that happiness. She was imagining, but her conviction, her deep soul tells her, no, Savitri, that is not the way you are going to go along with him. That is not your way at all. You have come here for something else. Not to go like Sati, as any other pious, holy woman would do. It is not for that purpose that you will disappear. Now, this is a very deep thought. It is not just a thought also. There is a deep occult content in this, in the wife going as Sati with her dead husband. There is some occult content in it. It has a meaning, it has a purpose, it has something which is marvelous also. But Savitri is not going to accept that line of action. She knew she must not clutch that happiness. Now the story of Sati is an ancient story. It is of course narrated in the Puranas, but it must have been present in its true significant way even during the Vedic times. Even the legend of Savitri belongs to the Vedic cycle, and if Shyavendu, the yogi, is referring to the aspect of Sati, it also means that it has the Vedic validity, Vedic support, Vedic adhara, Vedic content in it. Should Savitri therefore follow the Vedic path, not the social, the traditional, not the recent degradation of Sati type, but in its true content? Should she follow the Vedic path and go as Sati with her husband?